All board members present, so we can call the meeting to order if we're ready. Fantastic. Welcome to our February 24th, 2026 meeting. We will call the meeting to order, and we have an immediate agenda item, which is the appointment of the board clerk. So we need this is a voting item.
It is.
We will entertain motions.
I move to appoint Emily Tracy Arm as the clerk of the Ithaca City School District, Ithaca, New York, for the 2025-2026 school year.
Second.
I forgot the word, but yes, second. And I want it noted for the record, I said it before.
Moved by Adam, seconded by Emily. Moved by Adam, seconded by Jacob. Discussion, debate, dialogue, question. Fantastic. Hearing none. All in favor. Votes unanimous. And we will take the oath.
I, Emily Tracy Arm, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the clerk of the Board of Education of the City School District according to the best.
Thank you, Emily. Welcome and welcome back. We'll continue on. Are there any modifications to the agenda? Hearing none, Hearing none, we'll continue. Agenda item 3.1 is public comments, and we do have Catherine Sonera joining us virtually.
Hold on a second. Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good evening. My name is Catherine Cernera, president of the Ithaca Teachers Association. I am speaking tonight to amplify the public comment made at your last voting meeting by ITA member and Caroline kindergarten teacher Nancy Braun, and to voice our teachers' strong support for expanding students' opportunities for play during their school day. As teachers, we are focused on enhancing opportunities for both structured play, such as that provided by physical education classes, and unstructured play through daily recess. As Nancy shared 2 weeks ago, NICED guidelines indicate that physical education shall be a part of the daily schedule for students in grades K through 3, and students in grades 4 through 6 shall attend physical education at least 3 times per week. Additionally, although ICSD elementary students do have some form of recess daily, there are currently no NICED guidelines or requirements for students at any level to have recess. Nancy did an amazing job outlining the many benefits of play for children. So instead of focusing on why this is important, I would like to bring to your attention the ongoing union advocacy on this issue. My hope is that you will keep this at the forefront of your minds as we begin conversations about how to make the best use of time during the student academic day. Last year, the New York State United Teachers launched the Power of Play initiative, a campaign that includes a strong legislative advocacy component seeking to codify a minimum of 40 minutes of unstructured play through daily recess as part of the instructional minutes breakdown of a student's day in grades K through 6. Should this legislation be enacted, it would legally require us to make a major shift, as our elementary students currently have a 40-minute block daily with a 20-minute lunch and a 20-minute recess. The legislation we are seeking through our union is clear. This time for unstructured play for our youngest learners is critical, should be in addition to physical education time, and should be truly unstructured student-guided recess time rather than any movement breaks embedded in the curriculum or other guided play. As members of the ITA, we fully support this NICED initiative and will do our part to advocate for legislative action to secure this time for our students. Additionally, as the ITA, we took a clear stand on the importance of allocating more time for play in students' academic day during negotiations of our collective bargaining agreement. When ICSD asked us to consider a proposal extending the length of the student day, we returned with a clear and uncompromised stance that stated we were willing to enter these discussions, but on the condition that we extend the student day to ensure compliance with all New York State mandated instructional minutes, and in grades K through 8, any additional time be reserved for extensions of recess, lunch, movement, structured play, or unstructured play to promote students' physical, social, and emotional health. At the negotiating table, as part of our mutual agreement, we were assured that collaborative conversations with all stakeholders would be forthcoming and that this condition would be considered in those discussions. I greatly appreciate the opportunity public comment provides to amplify our teachers' clear support for giving students more opportunities to play during their academic day, and I look forward to being part of the ongoing conversations about how to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. We do not have anybody else signed up to speak, so board responses. Thank you, Catherine. That will bring us to student reps, agenda item 3.3.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, sure.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi guys, welcome back, I guess. How's everybody? Last board meeting, we brought up the idea of student reps doing some work to survey the school on accessibility. And what could be done to improve it in our schools. We don't have anything to present to you today, mainly due to the break, but we've begun talking to accessibility leaders in the building and about what they might want to see, along with reaching out to the broader student body about what they may want to see both on a daily basis, what could be done in classrooms, hallways, physical accessibility, learning accessibility, everything. On personal notes, I'm using crutches for a couple of weeks, and I've already noticed some things that I feel could be improved upon in the building. And I'm sure there's much more we can do beyond just the physical with that as well. Tonight's budget nights, we all know that. So I have something mildly budget related to discuss. Our school lunch. We've seen, let me rephrase this. We've heard some district level changes that could be coming to our cafeteria if students don't begin to get breakfast and lunch more often from our cafeteria. The primary change would be downsizing our cafe staff, which is currently just one, Dodie, who is there full-time currently. She prepares both breakfast and lunch for us daily, and as someone who actually works a food service job, after school, weekends, everything, it is incredibly impressive, the work that she's able to do for us. LECS is a very special school, and that's the same with our breakfast and lunch needs. From spring trips to fall retreat to weirdly scheduled days when everything has to be moved around because we have Fusion Week next week as well. We might want to need the kitchen for that. She helps us, she covers us, and she really is essential to our functioning as a school. As I said as well, she's the only one that works full-time in the cafe. She already does more than one full-time position can handle, and we really thank her dearly for that. As a student body, it would be devastating to see her reduced when the workload is already too much. As a board, your support, and Karen as well as our school rep, we would really appreciate your support in helping ensure our cafe is not reduced further. It comes in the wake of several years of decisions with a reduced access to our kitchen. For years, we made soup on Thursdays in our kitchen, and we gave that to the school. We're no longer able to do that. We used to have more open access to it for spring trips and whatnot. We no longer have that.
We used to sometimes bring in food that we grew in the garden as well and cook that, and
Yeah.
no longer can do that.
We still have the garden. Thank God. So the bottom line is we can't afford to see it reduced any further. And we know the numbers, seemingly the numbers are, they want at least 50 students getting breakfast and more than that, students getting lunch. I've seen quite a few students and I know the distress that puts in the cafe already. So reducing further would be really devastating for our experience as students, our experience in the kitchen, and really just food service in general at LACS. So that's really all I have for you. Pass it off to Emily.
All right. Great news. Both of our teachers who have been pregnant all year have had their babies. So Aurora had hers before break, and we saw some photos, and this baby is adorable. And next, the Lightning Thief is our musical this year. It's Tech Week for that, so that's where Boat is right now. All of the theater kids are going out of their minds all week, and I think it's going to be a great show. So if you guys want to turn up, it is Friday and Saturday at 7:30 and Sunday at 2. I've worn down your ears about this countless times, but Infusion Week is next week, guys. I am so excited. It is taking up so much of my time and my friend Victor, who is like spearheading the whole thing. So a lot of work and care and energy has gone into this student-led week, this student-led event. And I am really, really excited seeing the workshop list finalized, all of these really cool things that people from outside and inside the school are going to lead and teach people. And we've got the panel, which some of you are participating on. Thanks again to those people. And we've got some like celebratory times as well during the week. So it's going to be, I'm really, really excited for that. And that's next week. Finally, trips rotations are happening this Wednesday. That's like a shopping trip, I guess, for your trip. Some of the trips are, of course, year-long. So me and Julian and also Boat are on Spanish trip, which we've known that since the beginning of this year. Some of the trips are, you sign up for them in late March or late March. And tomorrow, I guess Wednesday, geez. Tomorrow we will have a time when people can just like go around and see which trips they might be interested in. So that's everything from rock climbing to like a local Explore Ithaca trip. We've got, do you think Miss Anna is still trying to get back to Puerto Rico? They did that last year.
I did that.
So we've got like a whole array of things that are happening, which is really exciting. So, yeah, that's all we've got. Thanks.
Yeah. So tomorrow is a Section 4 Scholar Athlete Advisory conference. So this is something that I'm one of the representatives on for Ithaca, as well as Skylar Lobenheim and Harris Germain. So we've been prepping for this for almost 5 months now. This is something we do every year, where we go and a bunch of people from around Section 4, the athletics section, leaders, captains, athletic directors, and coaches come and hear from students about what we can change and do better in sports. So that's tomorrow. And then also on sports, spring sports are coming up. So most of them are starting in a week or two, and tryouts and preseason practices are going on now and for the next few weeks. We also have UNAR Model UN coming up. So that's a Rochester conference in Rochester. That is next Friday and Saturday. So we're sending over 40 delegates and chairs this year, which is a really big amount for our team. We were sending, 5 to 10 to some conferences, even as recently as a few years ago. So really big steps for that. And then on our cell phone survey, we do have that all developed now, and we're just waiting to release our second semester cell phone survey, and we should have those that data back pretty quickly, and then I'll try to present it to you guys as quick as I can. So.
Hi everyone. Very great news. Code Red's robot is running, and we're running very fast, and we're throwing balls all over the place. So that's amazing, and we have competitions coming up very soon. Next month, so 2 back-to-back competitions, and hopefully we'll bring home a win for you guys and say, oh yeah, said we were gonna win, we won. So hopefully that happens. Also, we'd like to thank you guys for your support. I see like on the business document, I see Board of Education, I see, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We're all connected here. And in addition to that, I guess related to Board of Education, this October I applied to the Princeton Prize of Race Relations and I talked about our work here at the Board of Education and I happily won and attended the ceremony yesterday. And I found out that I was the first Ithaca City School District student to represent us. So hopefully that tradition keeps on happening and we keep on winning that award. And yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. There's really not that much from me. Our hockey team is playing their sectional championship this weekend, Sunday at the rink. So yeah, show up and support them if you can. Thank you.
Fantastic board responses, other than a round of applause for the award that was won. Please do share with us if you can, that'd be fantastic. Board responses.
Julian, about the accessibility, I'm working on setting up our first meeting for the Accessibility Advisory Council. And so I'll be sure once to kind of figure out dates to make sure whoever you and whomever you're working with can be included. Okay.
Pass it on as well.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Fantastic, as always, thank you, our student rep, greatly appreciate the information that's shared and the work that you do. We will continue on with our agenda, which is the consent agenda, and we will entertain motions.
I move to approve all consent agenda items listed in the consent agenda, consideration of accounts, personnel reports, students, minutes of previous meetings presented.
Moved by Adam, second by Jacob. Questions, debate, conversation? Before moving on, I think, of course, it obviously goes without saying that we should offer recognition to the Ethical Public Education Initiative for its continued support of the KDT trips. I know that this has been going on for quite some time, and our grandbaby can participate, and I know other folks do. So thank you for that as well as a donation from the Park Foundation. We thank both entities for the continued support of the Ithaca City School Initiative. Any additional comments from board members? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? The motion passed if there's one board member not present. That brings us to Dr. Brown, the superintendent's report.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, Professor. I wish to invite my friend and accountability officer, Lynn, to the table. But I wish to use our time this evening to share some very recent updates on our accountability status and some most recent accountability measures and metrics and outcomes. So this can be one of multiple opportunities to talk about this, but wanted tonight, because we sent out a press release today, to share what's happening and where we are seeing our data shift and where we have more work to do. So Lynn, maybe I'll turn it over to you, and we have some slides to share as well that we will put in the on board for other folks in the community to see afterwards.
I will do my best. It's very, very brief in describing a complex system. So get started. We received our 2025-26 accountability designations for our schools within the district, which are based on 2024-25 results. So we're looking at last year's data, and in some cases, 2 year ago data for graduation rates. On this slide, you can see that the state classifies each school, and within each school, student groups that have 20 or more results for each accountability indicator. So our schools receive multiple designations depending on their student population that fall within these classifications. So local support and improvement, formerly known as in good standing, is where we hope to see all our schools. And then moving up the level of support. So in the NICED accountability structure, as schools move up this pyramid of designations, there is additional support put in place in terms of funding and guidance for improvement planning in schools. So local support and improvement is at the bottom. Targeted support and improvement, TSI, is kind of in the middle there. We've had several schools in that designation for the past few years. And then moving on up, CSI, comprehensive support and improvement. You'll see The top three are identified every 3 years. This is one of those 3 years, so 2025-26, based on federal requirements, is a designation year for comprehensive support schools and additional targeted support schools. Other designations are based annually.
Thank you, Brad.
And what did we even? Oh, yes, this is the last one before the results. 2025-26 marks a change in New York State accountability. So we're not comparing apples to apples year to year. It's the reimagine phase, kind of the rebuild from post-COVID era teaching and learning. And in this new phase, you'll see there are the key changes are the chronic absenteeism indicator has been reimagined into an attendance indicator that looks at student progress in terms of attendance, not just at percentage of students who are chronically absent. So it's really looking at student growth in attendance patterns more so than just a cut score. They've also reintroduced at the elementary middle level a student growth indicator, which looks at students New York State ELA and math exams year over year improvement compared to other similar students. So similar students in terms of demographics and prior year scores. And at the high school level, they have reintroduced the college career and civic readiness indicator. The other critical change in the reimagine phase is that they reduced the number of results needed for a group to receive an accountability designation to 20 results. It was 30. So in the case of a high school where we're looking at a weighted average achievement based on 4 assessment scores, that could be as few as 5 students. 5 students times 4 scores equals 20 results. So it's really an effort to try to capture performance more holistically and to really validate the importance of all of our students in our schools and helping us drill down to where are we seeing success and for what student groups are we not seeing that same level of success? How do we respond? In those indicators, some are, we are given a performance level for each indicator for each school and each group. You can see on the left, 3 indicators are based on statewide rankings. That means they calculate the indicator, line up all the schools throughout the state, and determine performance levels based on where you fall in that. A performance level of 4 indicates you are performing in the top 25% of schools in the state. Performance level of 1, you are in the bottom 25%. The other indicators are based on static points. So what do we see? 5 of our schools for the weighted average achievement metric, which is looking at performance on New York State exams, are performing in the top 25% of the state. So performance level 4 for the all students group, which is really phenomenal. Additionally, the Ithaca High School ranks in the top 25% for the college career and civic readiness indicator. Thinking about that college and career readiness indicator, these are small, you can check it out online, but students, this is based on graduation outcomes for students. So what type of diploma are they receiving? Have they taken dual enrollment courses where they're earning college credit concurrently? Have they taken an AP course in high school? And then depending on just enrollment, participation in the course and how did they do? So depending on the different levels in which students have engaged in advanced academic classes, as well as the New York State Seal of Biliteracy, the New York State Seal of Civic Readiness, students, we get a weighted outcome for those students. So this is just showing more and more that like the access that kids have in our schools to advanced coursework is really strong. On the other end of the spectrum, just how schools are identified for additional support models. There's a matrix for both elementary, middle, and high school with scenarios that they look at the score for each accountability indicator. And if you meet one of these scenarios, the school and the specific group within the school is identified for additional support. There is amazing documentation that our communication team has put together online for this. So if you want to learn more and go deep, head to our district website because you can find lots of information that describes this in much more detail. In terms of identification, Enfield and DeWitt have both exited the TSI and CSI support model. So they have exited support model and are now in the LSI or local support and improvement for all groups. Beverly J. Martin, Hugo Heights, and Boynton will continue in their support models because of a technical change and not any change in how determinations are made. All three schools are shifting from the targeted support and improvement to the additional targeted and support improvement model for those schools. There are actually no TSI schools this year because ATSI and TSI use the same criteria and it's a 3-year identification year. So it's just when it happens, right? There are no additional requirements for that ATSI designation, but there would be additional funding for schools, these three schools. And I should also note that Beverly J. Martin did exit their support model for the Black students group and it remains identified just for economically disadvantaged. One more. Oh, yes. So our schools that remain identified for targeted and support improvement, we have seen year-over-year improvement. What you're seeing in this chart is the weighted average achievement indicator. So that is the ranked academic achievement indicator for the school or the designated group. ELA 2024-25 versus 25-26. So in all three schools, we saw growth for that. So that's increasing the number of students that are scoring at a level 2, 3, or 4 on the state exams. Less movement in math, which you'll see reflected in many of the plans that are in place this year that have an additional focus in math. And then, especially at Hugo Heights and Boynton, we've seen a significant decrease in chronic absenteeism for those identified groups. So we're excited by that progress, and we'll use that to inform our planning for next steps. I think that's okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to share some new and additional information. And again, we hope that we can have more conversations about this and other student achievement data. And I hope you see a trend every time I talk now, talk about student achievement data district-wide and then by individual schools. At your request and at mine. Last question from me quickly. I know it's something on the regular agenda item, but I thought it was important to share.
Before folks enter into those thoughts and questions, it'd be my recommendation that we put as an official agenda item for either the next meeting or the meeting after to more thoroughly explore this. Questions for Dr. Brown, comments?
I'll leave most of it for future meetings, but that's extremely exciting. We just want to say congratulations to everybody. Seeing so many schools come off of it, I mean, it's a huge jump for Chassis LA, math, and to hear that Black students are off on the GM, I mean, it's remarkable, and the drop in absenteeism as well. So it's very, very exciting to us. Thank you.
Ditto. I had some unrelated questions, and these might just be follow-ups from another time, and correct me if my timing is wrong on any of them. I know like 2 weeks ago when you had mentioned, like when one of the IT members had spoken, I'm not saying names, we say names, it's just during public comment. I don't know, when one of them spoke about physical education requirements, and then Catherine added on tonight, I think you had said you were preparing a response, but was that going to be this evening or another point?
We're looking forward to that being an agenda item at a future meeting, a near future meeting. We're gathering information, we're looking at audit reports. There's a lot of complex information for us to navigate through. And we hope to have a comprehensive presentation to the board on both items as well. And while I'm at it, I will underscore my wishes to enhance play and physical education in our school district. As someone who taught, who loved to infuse play, and 30-year certified physical education teacher, this is near and dear to my heart. And we have a lot to do to make sure we're not only compliant, but we do this in a way that's thoughtful and consistent with all the other priorities, including math and literacy. So yeah, we are looking forward to presenting something comprehensively in the near future.
And then I was also curious, I think it was at the end of February that we were going to see sort of like an update about cell phone policy.
My understanding, according to the policy, that conversation was gonna be in March. That's what the policy states, and so that's what we're planning.
My bad, and then
No apologies necessary.
I take it back, and then, open enrollment data. That was saying, I know, I think I didn't provide, just like I then, we talked about the study, the report in our last session. And I know I was hoping to see just data around like what percent of students are open enrolled at different schools, like what the impact is. That's something then that's going to be part of this study, or that's something, how can I get that?
That's an easy, I'll ask Dr. Bryman to upload that to your board docs, folder. That's a report that we can probably update monthly or quarterly and just be there scanning. And if it's not there right now, it will be there short order.
Really appreciate it. And then my last question, I promise, because you were talking about data, I'm curious, for the equity report card. I might be misreading it. It looks like it hasn't been updated for a little while, and I'd love to sort of.
Yeah, that's next now that we have this data,
Okay.
that's fresh as of 24 hours ago. So we hope to have the person running a department around accountability to update that and be ready to present. Maybe that's a good presentation to do the equity report card, accountability measures, and an ongoing conversation about achievement.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I think a lot of the stuff that Lynn referenced is in there, but then there's also additional metrics that I'm just curious about, so I'd love to see.
We are too.
Awesome.
I feel compelled to take the opportunity to also include in that presentation the history of the equity report card and how it became a model across the state for the ways in which the Ithaca City School District was trying to capture data, who was asking for it, how that came to be, and the importance of us using that data-informed processes as well. It was no small task to come up with the first equity report card, and I think we need to honor that labor and the folks who advocated on behalf of making that take place. So
Yeah,
I'm putting that in your ear, Doctor.
right.
And I'll
would help me with that.
We will let you make that happen.
And as a follow-up, in the previous district I worked on, we tried for 5 years to get anything close to that, and we're never successful, so. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, it came up in the NISBA conference as well with a couple of folks where that is a model, so. I'm excited to see it up there.
Got notes.
I'll just take, sorry, Karen,
So I
please.
do have a question. With the college career and civic readiness being reinstated, is it being reinstated due to the new terminology, the portrait of a student?
I don't want to be on camera trying to explain this New York State accountability measures and the way we're approaching. And I would also want to say, I don't think it's a reinstatement. I think it's a reimagining of how they want to do this. And then if you have some additional language here, it's new but it's not a reinstatement of it. But you want to?
Yes, it was imagined as part of the accountability program pre-COVID and then put on pause throughout lots of things that's happened in the last 5 years. And I do think it is directly connected as the New York State work their reimagined plan to the federal government to align with the Fortune of a Graduate and the work is being done to reimagine the ways in which we let young people show what they know in our state. So yes.
Much better said. Thank you.
I'll add that I've struggled with these accountability lists as someone who likes to look at educational data, trying to understand what they were really trying to capture or say, or how they were actually trying to be supportive or a strength-based approach and be constructive. So part of it for me is a little bit of hesitancy even to sort of talk about these lists. What I do not challenge is the significant increase that we find in test scores, as my colleague Emily Workman said. We know that is the result of our phenomenal educators, our leadership team, all educators in the district. And so I know as someone who works with a young person, just watching the change, which they bring a homework home in ways that are excited as opposed to dreading homework. That's a pretty big change in our house. So I'm very appreciative, and I do want to acknowledge, as much as the lists make me uncomfortable, I recognize what it means to have 2 schools removed from that list, and the direction we're headed. So to our community, I do hope you go to the accountability website. I do hope you take a look at I think as Lynn said, it's very sophisticated and convoluted and complex. And folks can study it for a year and still walk away with questions about how it's calculated. But I look forward to folks taking a look at it.
Let me just add to that, your comment about the history and the equity report card. I'm thinking of some of the public comment we got on some of the information that Lynn presented, and some of the comments were along the lines of why now? And I don't want to propose an answer to that, but I think the answer is because the legislation was passed in 2015, and then there was COVID and sort of this sort of delays in data coming in, and the reason now is because of the date of the legislation. But rather than open it up now, just maybe when we do a full presentation on this, if we could, for the public's benefit, just have an answer, a slide answering the why now, why am I here about this now question. I think the answer is the date of the legislation.
Thank you. No.
All right, board members, we will continue on with our agenda, which is budget development. We know it's a year-long process, and we are in it. Speaking.
And we are. I'm going to invite Dr. Leaksy to share. And we anticipate sharing briefly, but engaging in much more conversation and dialogue. And we are seeking some direction from the board this evening. Well, we want to focus on revenue and the revenue that we anticipate coming into our school district as we put together this budget for 26-27. And we also want to put in front of you our initial very first draft thinking as far as expenditures. And as we think about revenue and where we anticipate our revenue coming based on where we ultimately land on with regards to the tax cap, we want to compare that to where we expect our expenditures are going to be. And with some direction from the board this evening, we are going to be planning to put together our overall budget and funding request to you in the coming month or so. That's just thinking about the timeline and the direction we need from you as we start to do this development process. And you'll also see that the revenue and the expenditure conversation we're going to start tonight has been informed by a year-long conversation that many of you have been a part of and at the table. So with that, again, Dom has some numbers and some talking points, and then there's going to be an ask of you to give us some direction, and then we anticipate coming back for the next couple of months every time we are in a space together talking about this development. So Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. As this indicates, we intended to make this a discussion about revenue initially, but we were able to calculate at least a projected budget for 26-27. We also have the calculated tax cap, so we'll share that with you. So I'll start with just to set a baseline for the current year, the 25-26 budget. Just as a reminder that over our budget right now is 169, just a little bit over 169 million. Our projected, and I just want to state very clearly, is a preliminary figure for 26-27. We've calculated it just over, slightly over 177.6 million. And that's where we are at this point. As a percentage, that's about 5%, a 5% increase from year to year. Right? That's enough, isn't it? Yeah. Isn't this great? So I'll start with the good news, the state aid revenue. So we did see an increase in state aid, just to kind of break that down a little bit. We had projected or anticipated a 3% increase in state aid for foundation aid in particular, and we're happy to see that at 3.8, a 3.8% increase overall. And we would anticipate a slight increase when that's finalized. When the budget's passed, we usually see a couple $100,000 change there overall. And our expense-based aids have also gone up slightly. So our overall increase in state aid is about 5%, which equates to a little over 2 million.
Can I just add?
Sure.
How normal is this? And in particular, the sizable percent increase from those?
Yeah, the BOCES aid can fluctuate quite a bit. Just depends on what we've spent in the previous years. So it looks at our previous year and anticipates what our aid should be in the subsequent year. So that can fluctuate quite a bit. Our expense-based aids are just that. They're based on our previous expenses. So that's how they're calculated for the future. So we can see a lot of fluctuations in those from year to year. But like I said, we anticipated a 3% increase in foundation aid. We're fairly close with that. So that doesn't fluctuate quite as much, although in the past 2 or 3 years, we did see some higher than average fluctuations. So I think that's starting to level off a bit. Our expense-based aids, again, that's what we would anticipate, generally speaking.
Can we plug in a soundbite around building aid and how we at times need to borrow to generate some revenue here?
Much deeper conversation, but I'm happy to provide a little bit. So we were looking at what is the long-term impact for, we're looking at a capital project, in other words, what is that long-term impact if we don't expend those funds for capital projects? When we look at deferring maintenance over time, that can actually cost us more in the long term than handling it upfront when we do receive aid. Because of that deferred maintenance, we don't necessarily receive aid on those monies. So it's more important to, if it is, I would highly suggest we look at those repairs using capital funds rather than deferred maintenance and paying for them. We'll share a great deal more information from a financial perspective with you down the road as we have that discussion. So, you're welcome.
To add, just a question, if I'm not mistaken, there's been years that I've been on the board where the foundation aid has actually decreased or stayed flat. So this is a welcomed change for this upcoming year.
And thank you. And talk about that highlighted number of 2 million, because we're attempting to tell a story now and build to what I'm going to ask you. And that first slide showed about a $7 or $8 million delta, that 5% increase from year to year. So as we're thinking, we need to figure out where we're going to generate an additional $7 or $8 million to balance the budget going forward. So we're seeing a $2 million addition right now. And we're going to show you some other additions, but just keep track of where we are and how we're building it.
Big picture, I know we talked about this quite a bit, is that the breakdown of our revenue, I think we say this every meeting, but it's important to repeat, is that about 70% of our revenue comes from the local tax share, about 25% comes from state aid, and an additional 5% comes from other miscellaneous revenue. So I guess keep that in mind as we're telling this story. Great. Miscellaneous, it went to the right slide, which I'm thrilled with. Miscellaneous other revenue, just kind of give you a perspective there. Not a lot of change in this area, but part of the reasoning behind that is we anticipate the Fed decreasing rates, which would hurt our interest in our investments. So all in all, the fact that we're seeing an increase here is a good sign. Also, Cornell's increase of $55,000 is certainly helpful. So overall, our miscellaneous and other revenue, we anticipate an increase of about $165,000. So again, adding that to the story of how we get to that gap. So what does that look like in the overall impact of the tax cap? So the tax cap, we were able to calculate that. We'll share how that calculation comes to being in our next meeting. We'll actually show the tax cap calculator. The cap that was calculated is 4.18%. That is this year's tax cap. That's allowable with a simple majority. So we wanted to show you what that would look like if we went to the cap, what it would look like at 3%, what it looks like at 2%, and where we currently are. So again, as a reminder, the tax levy for 25-26 was a little over 115 million, and last year the tax cap was 3.67%. So again, in comparison, this year's tax cap is 4.18%. Okay. And what I want to point out here is at the cap, there would be no change or increase in our planned use of fund balance or reserves, if that were bigger. If it's less than the cap, if we went to 3%, we would use about 1.3 million of fund balance and reserve in addition to what we normally use. And again, 2%, a bit more, 2.5 million in increase.
So here's the conversation we want to have tonight as we think about expenditures and building the budget and putting in front of your expenditures and an overall funding request. I'm assuming no one wishes for us to go over the cap when we plan for our budget, but going to the cap is something we said we would be recommending as we're thinking about how we're going to use our fund balances, how we're putting together the budget, how we're maintaining programming and enhancing programming. Going to the cap is around 4.8%, and you see how that. I'm sorry, thank you. But you couldn't wait.
4.8 was a little draw.
Well, I won't that. 4.18% gets us to a point. And you'll see where we land with the other scenarios. And it's been a while since we did not go to the cap yet. But that is an option for us. And not knowing this does not assume what the tax rate will be, where we are with that. And we've seen that go down significantly over the past few years and anticipating it going down again. We've been told by our assessor that there is no planned assessment shifts that are coming this year or next year or the next 3 years.
We were told the next 3 years.
So with that being the case, we do anticipate some tax rate decreases that we've seen. So a lot of information that we know we'll talk much more about, but as we're talking with budget developers, we kind of need to sense from the board tonight put together a budget, assuming tax cap, much less than tax cap, or what we're not recommending over the tax cap. That's the conversation tonight.
Why don't we begin with, you're asking for some information, right? Some feedback or some
Feedback,
direction.
or questions.
Right, so why don't we begin with questions that folks may have?
We got an email from a community member who mentioned that in some budgeting processes, like, sort of like more than one budget would be created, like on the assumption of like going, like, what does it look like to go to a tax cap? What does it not? What does it look like to use an increased fund balance? What is it not? Is that something that I'm not familiar as much with that sort of process. So I'm curious if that's something we considered, especially in Ithaca, where I know there's always that question of we want as much as possible for our schools, and there's an impact on taxes on all families in particular.
From our perspective, it asked to present multiple budgets. We would do that, and it would just be differences in how we're utilizing our fund balances, which are, as we said at this table, are very healthy at this time. And if going to the cap, we can maintain that significant help and not take on as much risk. I would not, in previous years, we have presented budgets, 3 different budgets that all assume different levels of cuts. At this point, I wouldn't anticipate bringing to you anything that has cuts at all. However, if you wish for us to minimize the tax cap implications, we would be looking at fund balances more aggressive. Hope that makes sense, but I'm just trying to cut through what could have been hours of conversation about that particular question. We've done that in the past.
No, I appreciate the answer.
I guess I had a question about, I guess, degrees of freedom in the spending of the budget. I mean, there's a lot of fixed costs. So like when we're looking at these numbers and we're sort of imagining we're gonna spend X number of dollars, we can either spend that number of dollars by dipping into the fund balance or not dipping into the fund balance if we ask the community for more money. My question would be like, what degrees of freedom do we have in terms of buckets of spending that we could, be considering that question, like, well, do we have to dip into the fund balance? Could we cut a particular bucket? If we ask for 4.18% over, is there something additional we might be able to use that money for that if we don't? So I guess I'm curious about the non-fixed buckets.
Thank you for asking. And my answer will be similar to what I just said. While it wouldn't be a recommendation, if asked to make reallocations or adjustments or cuts, we can do that. For the fixed or unfixed, I don't think anything is fixed, frankly, other than utility bills and all of those other things. They're going up probably at a higher rate than our budget is, but
Salaries are pretty good.
yeah, that's FTE counts. So we could make reductions to FTE counts. You can't reduce someone's salary, so it would be in the form of just reducing the FTE counts.
Sure. But I mean, I guess I consider those all fixed buckets because we already have commitments to paying certain amounts of health insurance, and that makes up, from my memory, like a very large percentage of the budget, 60-something% maybe for salaries.
And I'm so happy we're having this conversation because the FTE count is not fixed. At any point, we can reduce the number of folks we have. Now, an individual who is here at a salary, we cannot reduce their salary. But the actual FTE count and the person even, there are ways to risk. I've been a part of furloughs, but there are things we can do that are not fixed if we get to that point.
With the, also just help me understand what's normal. So with if we would need to use 2.5 million if we went to 2%, how normal is that? I guess. And I'm also curious because I'm trying to think in terms of like to what degree having a healthy fund balance is important now versus in a couple of years, like when the ITA contract is up for renewal, because then I assume we'll have pretty different salaries, right, than what we do now. So I would just love to be able to think strategically about that. Sure, some context would be helpful.
We use fund balance every year, right? So what that's really saying is that we have to add to that. We have to dip into more of our fund balance and reserve. And that sets us on a trajectory, right, for continuing more because our costs will continue to increase. So that means we would continue to eat into those fund balances and reserves to sustain where we currently are. So ultimately, that would mean cuts down the road. So to some degree, it's normal, provided that you can cut costs down the road or you have a plan for doing so. Thank you.
I have the time group experience right now. Because last time we had a conversation at this table about not going to the cap. I think ultimately the board decided not to go all the way to the cap. For various reasons at the time. Including you, Professor. And at the time, and then I at the time warned, I said, if we don't use this opportunity to go to the cap, manage our fund balances strategically over time, maintain our program offerings, in a year or two, we're going to be looking at going over the cap and or cutting. And we did. So I always want, if you have an opportunity to go 4.818% or without going over the cap, generating that kind of revenue at a time where we have the fixed costs and some at that time where we want to do more at times for our young people, let's take that opportunity. Because you can't get that money back, and that money is compounded. I think we left $3 million on the table that one year. And then compounded as you think about going over the cap, the attempts to go over the cap and going over the cap 2 or 3 times since then, we had to catch up. And at times our fund balances were depleted. And that caused our bond rating to go down. So again, we are presenting to you an approach that stabilizes, it makes it predictable, and it maintains our fiscal health without exorbitant fluctuation. That was the word we used this morning. Anyway, but just again, just a recommendation.
Right, because in doing this, like doing the cap of like 4.18%, that therefore our credit rating is not being impacted.
Right. That's right.
Especially,
It may go up.
Right.
yeah, go up, but not.
Yeah,
correct.
Right.
Because we don't want it to decline, especially when we're going out for the project.
That's right.
Please go ahead.
One additional factor, we're talking about the capital project, and it does play into this. We have a 7% debt limit, right? And that's how we pay for that debt. And this is more of a caveat to that point than we were talking about earlier. If we don't maintain that debt, and we have the emergency projects down the road, we have a roof fail, so on and so forth, those costs then escalate, and you will see a spike in our budget and a spike for taxpayers. So maintaining that debt limit is extremely important, and it helps us to budget so we're not seeing those huge fluctuations in our budget year by year. That's another important factor to consider.
So I would say that's one of the things that we've been trying to do is have some long-term fiscal planning, which includes capital projects, and make sure that we're taking care of both deferred maintenance and other projects as well. So I don't know if it's a 7% limit, but we've been trying to keep the budget at 7% to pay for debt that's incurred when we take on these projects. I think you probably hear, my apologies, I don't want to say it that way. I would not be a fan of going over the tax cap under any circumstances in this current economic climate. You're talking about the school district utilities going up. I've been having conversations even looking at my own bills that have seen a 26% increase over a 2-year span. So part of that gives me some concern about how much we then ask voters, taxpayers, community members, and I try to remind folks that everyone is a taxpayer because they're all buying goods and services in Ithaca. So it's not whether you want a home or not, it's what you're going to pay in taxes. And so trying to find that balance between long-term fiscal planning that we know will keep the district in good, sound financial health, and the ability for people to be able to pay when, affordability is the hot word, but it's real, right? Things cost more, utilities cost more. And so I don't know that I would be in a place to give you feedback as one board member tonight. I know that the cap going over the cap would be off the table for me. That part I realize. But I would like to consider what does it mean? And maybe this is the question that Jacob was asking. And I don't know, you can let me know, Jacob. But at some point in time, it makes sense to go into fund balance to help support taxpayers with a goal or hope that we would be in a different financial situation, or maybe utilities level out, or maybe healthcare levels out. I don't see that taking place. You were correct. I was one of the people that voted against going to the tax cap last time. We did see a hit there. That part I understand. But I think that's always a question to ask is dipping in a little bit of the fund balance the right move to make sure that we're being responsible to our taxpayers. And I still also want to explore Adam's question about, I don't know about flexibility, Adam, but I think were you also trying to ask, are there ways in which we can decide that maybe we don't need to spend money on that, or maybe we need to spend more money here. Was that the
Yeah,
intent behind
yeah,
the
I
question?
mean, yes, if I could, I guess I could say, I mean, it seems like looking at the numbers like this, it just feels like a philosophical question in a way. I mean, obviously it's a practical question, but it's kind of like, do we want the community to fund? Like, do we want to ask the community to give us more money so that we don't have to dip into the fund balance? But then for me, I feel like dip into the fund balance for what? And then I need to see the proposed budget to get a sense of what that would be. And so then I was sort of asking, like, what levers can we play with in the proposed budget, whatever that is, for us to make that decision of like, do we need to increase by 4.8 million versus 2.3 million? Maybe there's a way we can only ask for 2% by cutting XYZ, but it's, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's right.
And the last thing I'll say though, is to remind our community is that our last audit, which I know we talk about a great deal of time, demonstrated again another round of solid fiscal management, and thus the reason why the audit came in better than people anticipated. People are finding efficiencies. People are trying to find ways to be much more judicious in how we're spending our money. We're in a good fiscal health as a district for a reason, and I don't want that to go unnoticed as well. So I'm hearing a couple of things, Dr. Brown, and I'm not sure how either board members want us to respond or how you want us to, or what more you need to have this conversation.
I don't know if I need anything else, because I'm hearing some things that are pushing me to think a little bit different too. As Dom and I and the budget developer are building the budget, maybe we do put together 3 options. And 3 options, and I'll say it now so people won't be nervous, that won't include significant cuts to fixed costs or flexible costs, however we want to term it. And how we would use fund balances differently based on where we went on the tax cap. Now, if the board wishes for us to make cuts instead of going to the tax cap, maybe that's the next conversation. But when we talk about expenditures at the next meeting, we will present the expenditures and through this lens, if that makes some sense. It is philosophical at this point because we need this conversation to think about line by line. We need to think about the total dollars we're going to have before we can get into what we would pull from fund balances and or if we would need to cut. Hope I'm trying to talk out loud on public on camera being recorded, which is all hard too. But I'm
doing the same thing so people can come back and yell.
Yeah.
Dom, let me know if my thinking about this is incorrect. Right. In some regards, what we have is 3 scenarios here that could be considered, depending on how one would view it, a rollover budget. In other words, we're keeping, this is what it's going to cost to keep the programs we currently have up and running this school year.
That's correct.
And how we pay for that is the different levers that we're seeing.
Exactly.
So that's a fair way of looking at it, that we are starting with not zero-based budgeting, but a rollover budget. We know expenses will increase. For us to do that and keep everything we're doing now. Right. These would be the these are 3 potential ways we can do that and keep our current program.
That's correct.
I don't know if that's helpful for other board members.
And again, too, you were asking about essentially what's discretionary in the budget, correct? So we have to determine what isn't, right? So I think Dr. Brown was talking about that. You know, our positions discretionary, and I don't think that was discussed. So if you take that out of it and you consider what is discretionary, very little. In school districts, most of what we do is mandated or contractual. We have contractual obligations. So that limits us quite a bit from that perspective.
I'll go ahead here.
Go ahead. Well, I mean, one question I would ask Dr. Lisi, and I think the answer would have to come back in a later meeting. But I mean, what I'm seeing here is a couple scenarios that are really more about cash flow management.
Right.
There are not major differences in expenditures here or priorities here. So when I think about cash flow management, and I think you're right that we should see a decline in interest rates. What I'd like to know is what's the net effect on the district of a change in interest rates? Because on the one hand, interest rates go down, the float on our current cash is less. So that's a bad thing. But we're about to go to the bond market, I hope, and issue over the next couple of years, $44 million in debt, and the cost of that debt is going to be less. So I'd just be curious to know when you think about cash management, what's the net effect of a drop in the prime rate of 1%?
Sure.
You had referenced that maybe you were thinking like what I was thinking. I think you were thinking more nuanced than me. I just wanted to name my questions are coming from the lens of my inclination as an educator is give schools all the money, right? for all the things because schools are under-resourced and educators are underpaid. And we're also in a really crazy economic climate. And when it comes to fund balances, I'm just very curious about how this plays into the conversations we're having about potential voices that are out there consolidation in the future, as well as sizable raises. And so I guess I feel like I need to know more information about what the financial impacts of that would be to know whether or not it's wise to use increased fund balances.
I think obviously we're all coming at it from different perspectives. I see, for me, I just want to feel like I have to respond. I see those conversations as not the same. Any potential, even hypothetical idea about moving buildings or whatever that looks like, would not be, from my perspective, would not be directly impacted by this budget. The question becomes, as we know, fund balance is a savings account. So how often can you go to that savings account before it's empty? And so there are other things that could happen over that time period. You know, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, like even if the board were to commission a second study to get more information from the first study, and then have additional conversations, like any potential movement would be 5 to 6 years out from my one limited perspective. In that 5 or 6 years, we would be doing some different math and calculations, both with fund balance and revenue, tax cap, a whole host of things, maybe some new properties, whatever it may be. But I just wanted to make sure I put that out.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Emily, you had a question, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, I'm interested in both pieces. I'm very interested in exactly what you were asking for, Sean, about understanding what that would actually mean between, the 2% and the 4% on our fund balances, and how that would impact both us and taxpayers, on which route. But then I also very much agree with Adam, and I think I want to be wary of the language of. I feel like we're getting caught up on language sometimes, and both about what pieces we're actually talking about, and also like even using the word cuts puts me like on edge a little bit, because I think that what I'm interested in, and maybe this is different for you, Adam, is like efficiencies, and this is why I've asked the finance committee if we can really sit down and talk a little bit more about like educational programs and initiatives that are happening in schools, and to really understand like what those are, and how much they cost, and if they're being utilized optimally, so that we could understand. And this is like not from this year, this is a question, kind of an ongoing question for me, and what makes it really hard for me to weigh in too much on budget conversations is that I really want to understand a little bit more, like a rollover budget. Okay, we're doing the exact same thing as last year, but like, was everything being done like at the most optimal level possible? And if not, I don't see that so much as a cut as like an opportunity to make sure that all of the spending that we're doing is like totally aligned with improving product outcomes for kids. So one of the things that I was thinking about, just as an example, is, when we're talking about staffing, even, I've heard a lot of conversations around the number of staff in a lot of elementary school classrooms. And I know that Mary and her team are already working on making sure that those are kind of at optimal levels, that there's not too many aides in one room, and that teaching and learning in that classroom is meeting the needs of every student to the point where some of them may not need or want to, like things like that. Or, I was in a classroom the other day that seemed like quite a small classroom, but had 2 full-time, like PhD level incredible teachers in there. And with the number of students, like, we have this approach to co-teaching, but is there like a level of students that needs to be in the class to make it worth spending the money on a set? Just like questions like that are not advocating for removing a program or even an approach to education by any means, but just kind of being able to really understand how those approaches are actually looking in classrooms. And I'm sure you're already doing. I'm not implying at all that you're not doing this to make sure that all of that's happening at the most optimal and affordable level that's still meeting the needs of all students and others.
I think that's also gonna be, I appreciate that. I think that's also gonna be a nuanced conversation. One, I again recommend folks actually read the audit. Whether you're a numbers person or not, you get some idea of the ways in which some of the money is spent. And for our local community who are watching the meeting, for pay attention that sometimes it may not even be something that's budgeted through ICSD. It may be part of state grant money that pays for those two people in the classroom. And so making sure that we're aware of where the actual money's coming from is equally as important is about efficiency. So.
All right, thank you for that, because you're helping me think about how to talk about this going forward. Because as I'm hearing you ask those questions and wanting that deeper analysis, I'm thinking about how we've raised class sizes over the last 5 years. And when the budget went down, we significantly raised class size. But at the same time, we were saying we're going to be more efficient and still meet the needs of our kids. And that happened. And we're not talking about it, but there are few people in our elementary and secondary schools who are classroom teachers, and that's because of an efficiency that we did, not a cut. But at the time, people felt like a cut. And I'm also thinking about the number of support professionals we have. When I got here, that was the director on the board. We have been cited by the state by having far too many, and we probably were. Our ratios were far exceeding anyone else in our state, if not the nation. And we were asked at that time to do the same kind of work, but do it much more efficiently, and we did. So I think we're down. I don't want to be quoted, but there are dozens of numbers of FTE. So I think that's an ongoing conversation. And I'm thinking about even this administrative team is down 20%. And I still feel like we're efficient and effective, but it's different. Now, as folks are asking for enhancements, yeah, I would love to have an associate principal in every elementary school. I hope Samantha Little's not in the room, but yeah, people have been asking for an associate principal at every elementary school. And wow, that would be great. When I was a principal, I had an associate principal at the same size school that was outstanding. But when that cut came in Henrico County, I had to be better and more efficient. So it's an ongoing conversation. I don't want people to think that we've not had that conversation and we're not doing it. That is hard work. And you've asked us to manage it in a way where people aren't running out of the room with their hair on fire in some ways.
Yeah. And just to clarify, my question goes another way too. If you're realizing that like we really do need that, that's also helpful to know, but being able to kind of break that information down.
I also want to clarify too, if we're talking, and thank you for a great question. This concept of rolling over the budget doesn't necessarily imply that we're not making the necessary changes. The changes might be cost neutral with the exception of inflationary rates. So I think that's important for folks to keep in mind.
Maybe we bury that term.
Poor choice of terms.
Yeah. I've been using it. We've all been using it for about a decade now. Maybe we just stopped using it as of today because I see now it's not been using.
It's not really a rollover because we are making changes for programmatic changes, efficiencies. So it's not the exact same. So it is a poor choice of terms for that. I apologize. So we are in February, right? We'll be coming up soon. This happens quickly. Do you feel like you and your team have enough direction to move forward next and then come back for us to have continued conversations?
Yeah. What would the next conversation look like?
We'll bring back the expenditure predictions and where we are as far as what we plan to spend and where that's going to come, different pots, etc. And we'll compare that to where we see our revenue coming. And then we'll have another conversation about what adjustments need to be made.
If there were shifts from last year to this year, could we also highlight those? Because I'd be curious to see that.
Okay. And maybe we'll list some things from the audit report too that are shifts in expenditure that were made from year to year. Some anticipated, some not.
And any opportunity to tie those back to your annual goals and related also to that. I really wish I could be spending more on this and or vice versa.
I'm also interested in how we're tying it back to student performance and student achievement.
I was going to say the student experience generally, right? Because I also think a budget over time, right? There's just initiatives that maybe serve one purpose that perhaps may not be more like, if there is specific expenditure put in for the adoption of one curriculum and then we're moving in another direction. I'm just very curious to know both efficiencies and also, does this still meet our intended purpose? And if so, how do we need to increase it or sustain it? And if not, where do we perhaps have a new purpose? So
some of these
I'm waiting for the big.
Some of these conversations will also be taking place at the Finance and Facilities Committee, so I encourage folks to participate in those. And so there'll be an active 2 to 3 months of meetings to get us started.
And also at the BOCES this Wednesday is the Central New York School Board Association is hosting a legislative forum. Where we get our Senator Webb and our second person and talking about the state budget, because the state budget impacts our budget. So therefore, we received emails as board members to attend this. So that and there's one of the, I think executive directors that are connected with Central New York School Board Association, Dr. Tim, who's a finance guru within New York State is there too. So several places we could go for continuing education because this is complex knowledge that we do.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Look forward to the next conversation. With that, it brings us to the possibility of entering into executive session if we entertain motions.
Move to enter into executive session for the purpose to discuss negotiations between the Ithaca City School District and Ithaca Employees Association, and to discuss the employment history or matters leading to the employment, promotion, discipline, or removal of district personnel.
Moved by Adam, second by Jacob. All in favor? For the most part, this concludes the meeting. We will not conduct any other business other than to come back and say the meeting is hereby closed. So thank you all very much. Feel free to stay.